Hi, I'm Craig Lounsbrough, and I want to welcome you to Life Talk. Thanks for being here. You know, I'm backwards. I don't think I'm backwards, and I wouldn't necessarily see myself as backwards, nor would I tell you that I'm backwards. But I'm backwards. And the oddity of it all is that I actually see backwards as forwards. From where I'm sitting, it doesn't look backwards at all. However, in terms of how I conceptualize the realities of life as held against the limitations that I perceive myself as having, I am backwards. Now, I'm backwards because I have assessed the realities of the existence within which I am forced to operate, and I've determined the permanently fixed limitations that define my humanity as I live within that existence. And based on the conclusions that I have drawn in these areas, I've done a rather splendid job of setting the parameters for my existence by configuring it to the best of my ability, what's possible and what is not. And in the end, this determination that I have made regarding that which is possible versus that which is impossible is markedly canted toward the impossible. And that leaves me facing a life bereft of everything except a handful of the most limited possibilities. And worse yet, this determination has come to define all of life as I know it, leaving me nothing bigger than myself. I've categorized the whole of life as falling within the limits that limit me, assuming that these are limits for everything that exists or will exist or could ever exist. And in that sense, I have dramatically drawn down life into some minute rubric that is but the slightest fraction of what life really is. Indeed, I am backwards. Well, you know, I think that we reject God because he's not backwards. He comes to us asking us to move forward, which we, by virtue of our shallow determinations about how life works, see as backwards. And we stand there wondering why we would be asked to do something so utterly preposterous as moving backwards. In fact, what God calls forward, we call impossible, or improbable, or ridiculous, or naive, or fanciful, or ignorant, or any number of other explanations that really do more to explain how backwards we really are. You know, history is littered with God's reversals. Leprosy was healed when the person should have been consumed by it and died. Bodies of water were split in two when they should have been completely impassable. Food to feed literally thousands was secured from nothing more than a few small fish and a handful of leftover loaves of bread. Massive armies were evaporated without so much as a shot being fired. Dead teenagers were raised to life instead of being dropped in a hole. Paralytic limbs were straightened and people walked away when they should have crawled away. That stuff's all backwards. Well, you know, then there is the grand reversal of all, the grand reversal of Easter. It began with an execution reversed, whereby he who was innocent was brutally executed by those who were guilty. It was an inhumane execution turned into ingenious sacrifice, whereby an end for one man turned into a beginning for all men. It was a devout religious leader who should have cast his vote against this man, who instead carried this man's body into his own tomb. And 3 days later, it was an empty tomb when it should not have been, leaving a dead man walking, which is a reversal of the most astounding sort. It was a group of terrified disciples keeping their heads down while crawling back to their old lives, now standing directly in front of the man they watched lose his. Easter, it was all backwards. These were all uncategorically opposite of what should have been. And if we apply the realities of the existence within which each of us are forced to live, these things and so many more were and are completely backwards. They were completely opposite of how it all should work. They simply did not and could not fit into how we have conceptualized the realities of the existence within which we are forced to operate, and how we have concurrently determined the permanently fixed limitations that define our humanity. They are backwards. And so going forward, so see, now to fix this conundrum, might we say that to go forward, we must indeed be willing to go backwards. And I suppose the best way to do that is to switch the two of these in our minds by reversing our perception of how this existence actually operates. And we cannot do that unless we include God. For God is the single and sole thing that reverses the limits of our humanity by quite literally obliterating those limits with his limitlessness. Therefore, we must comprehensively trade who we are for what he is. And in the trading, trade off everything of us in the exchange. Look, we must understand that it is not our limitations that define our existence at all, although we have foolishly surrendered to that terribly myopic idea. Rather, it is God's power and nature that must define it. We must understand, or at least accept, the immense, radical, and in many cases incomprehensible difference between who we are and who God is. And out of that understanding, we must willingly trade our limitations for God's limitlessness. Indeed, that alone will abruptly turn things around. And when we do that, backwards becomes forwards. And when that happens, we will have cut the chains that we've slapped on life. We will have blown out the boundaries that we thought defined us. The possible versus that which is impossible now becomes wholly canted toward the possible. And the horizons that we had tightly fixed on our lives suddenly blow out to horizons that are absolutely horizonless. And standing in the gaping space now created, we suddenly start to understand that dreams are more than hopeful fantasies that our minds toy with. Rather, they become realities that life is changed with, that a vision for something better can move from nice idea to transforming ideal. That hope is not some thin thing that is subject to the winds of fate, but is crafted hard by the hands of God. That the end of ourselves is where God begins. That the fear of failure is slain cold by success already hot on the way. That a looming mountain is nothing more than a road in disguise. And that the impossible is not an obstacle, but it's an invitation. Now, all of this and more happens when we refuse to continue to go backwards. All of this and more is the true forward. This is the incessant and unrelenting message of God throughout history. And it's a message handily delivered by God's Son with potent impact on Easter. It's a message for anyone who will hear it. It's the single and sole message that can turn us from backward to forward. Therefore, be assured that the direction of our lives and the outcome of our existence will hinge on what we do with this single message. Oh yeah, I am backwards, but no longer. How about you? You'll find additional resources to enhance your Easter celebration on our website at www.craiglpc.com. Thanks for joining us on Life Talk today. You'll find Life Talk on most podcast platforms as well as YouTube. And I would also encourage you to check out our daily posts on all of our social media sites. Thanks for being here today. Here's wishing you and your family a truly blessed Easter season. What do you do with hope when you have none? Because I'd be willing to bet that there have been times when you haven't had any at all. And right now may very well be one of those times.